So SOTL is all about sharing our research and insights together, and of course it's the opportunity to link up. Without further ado, let us proceed.
Hello everybody, so lovely to be here. So when COVID hit the world, we can go to the next slide now. Yes, great. And we all went into lockdown, and we went into hard lockdown in South Africa in March 2020 last year. There were all these articles and opinion pieces on the wonders of technology. You know, we'd all at last been shoved into the 21st century. And this I found yesterday, in fact, was an article in an international newspaper saying, right, online exams, this is the new norm. However, in South Africa, there was a poignant piece from collaborating academics, including some from our institution, on the real challenges that we were seeing, particularly with respect to the whole issue of digital fluency, the equity of access. Now, this question of suddenly we're going to be in the online space with all our exams is problematic in engineering. Assessments in engineering are the primary instrument for certification processes to ensure internationally aligned standards. And we've experienced serious challenges in this space, as we well know, 2 years down the line. So our faculty-wide experience of the move to emergency remote teaching and then augmented remote teaching, learning and assessment, and the ways in which we implemented this, presents an important opportunity for critical reflection. Now, in our faculty, we have a concerted kind of holistic approach collectively to everything that we do. All our curriculum, teaching, learning and assessment initiatives are part of a larger UCDG funded recommended engineering education practices project, which we call REAP. And as you can see from our logo, we've tried to capture a holistic approach to education, a curriculum that attends to the know, be, do elements, and our job as educators to support students cognitively, affectively, and systemically. So within the faculty, our ethic is one of what my dear colleague Lamuli Klatshwayo and his collaborators call Ubuntu Kurere, curriculum as this dialectical space for engagement with varied voices. And what we're going to do today is give you some insights into feedback from the faculty as a whole, but which actually started as an institutional SWOT analysis workshop earlier this year on our e-assessment systems. And this is where Tanea and I started to work together to collaborate on what it is that we're actually seeing and reflect on that. Over to you, Tanea.
Hi, thank you so much for that, Karen. So based on that, our question became, a faculty-wide analysis was conducted to reflect on the experiences of our varied stakeholders, with a focus on how do we improve student learning while better utilizing our available resources. Our methodology involved developing an assessment matrix that we then used to sort through the data that we collected. This was taken by, so the data came from student surveys, postgraduate and undergraduate level, educator surveys, and departmental discussion forums across the Faculty of Engineering. A SWOT analysis was carried out to determine the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats around assessment practices, with a specific focus on the implications of the shift to emergency remote teaching. The factors were assessed in terms of those of internal and external origins. Additionally, we used the classification around whether factors were predominantly cognitive, affective, or systemic in nature, and these are demonstrated by the C, A, and S symbols that you'll see on our results page. During the SWOT analysis, we took a detailed, candid look at all of these factors to figure out the areas where we are experiencing help and we're experiencing harm. So let's start with the strengths that we found to be critical to our success. Despite equipment and connectivity challenges, staff and students reported a significant shift in digital fluency development. Several initiatives were developed to reinforce conceptual grasp through scaffolded online quizzes and case studies, as well as more open-ended project-based assessments. Initiating opportunities for students to iteratively reflect on their learning on a regular basis was found to be our main strength, and that is formative assessments. And this is because it leads to deeper learning, which is what we need for effective engineering student performance. Online quizzes that were automatically marked freed up the time of the lecturers and the assistants, allowing them to focus on more meaningful engagement. Quicker feedback, the students found very helpful. It helped them to identify the gaps in their understanding. It also encouraged them to pay better attention to their instructors. Building of question banks, while time intensive, was found to save a lot of time in the long run for many educators. Further, being able to randomize the questions that were being put into assessments helped deter students from seeking assistance from their peers. Research overall shows that concepts covered well in formative assessments are better retained into the final exam. So, inconsistent communication was a common complaint which we've identified in our weaknesses. The mix of communication method made it very difficult for students to keep track of everything that the lecturers have said. This is because of multiple forums, multiple lectures, and some inconsistency for lecturers themselves. The most prominent weakness identified was self-regulated learning. Students struggled with information overload, workload management, time management, and finally, lecturers were unhappy with the students actually viewing the material. And this ties, we feel that this ties very importantly into our formative assessments. We need to create opportunities where the students are forced to go over the material before their final assessment. Finally, the issue of digital fluency has come up increasingly. The inequalities in our student body were magnified, where access to resources and digital proficiency placed those that were already underprivileged at even more of a disadvantage. Finally, looking at threats. Systemic access, we know, is a pervasive problem, but coupling that with the loss of effective access due to ERT and outlaw led to a significant lack of cognitive access. Undergraduate students found asking questions and making comments in a public arena overwhelming and stressful. That fear of ridicule and embarrassment very heavily deterred participation. Educators similarly missed the socio-cultural physical cues that they were used to receiving in a classroom setting, seeing if students were confused or bored, or if anyone laughed at their joke. Postgraduate students similarly felt isolated and lonely and unable to express themselves well. These deficits in our CAS access resulted in a loss of active, cognitive, affective, and systemic engagement overall. However, the most prominent threat that we identified was the lack of validity of assessment results. As students had access to peers and online solution resources during unsupervised remote assessments. So research suggests that opportunities are not what strongly motivates students to cheat. There are numerous aspects, but one significant deterrent is a lecturer's influence. And that led us to the question of how does the loss of classroom interactions, the building of a rapport and development of a relationship, how did this affect how students view unethical behavior? Some of the reasons that drive students are a determination to succeed. Is your funding dependent on how well you do? Familial pressure. Another important aspect was low impact penalties used by instructors and whether it is considered a norm among peers. The one aspect that I think was very well addressed is the risk of detection. And so educators tried to overcome this by customizing individual problems, making assessments more open-ended. However, this was reported as being very time-consuming, and it made the marking of these assessments even more so. In fact, we found that ERT ATLA in general significantly increased the staff workload. And we've placed this under opportunities because it is something that definitely needs to change. So while ERT has forced us to make better use of the available technology, there is still sufficient room for improvement. We see that blended learning approaches have the potential to substantially reduce staff workload. For example, by building a repository of online resources, such as recorded lectures, worked example videocasts, and question banks. In terms of dealing with long-term staff overload reduction, we need to also make better use of our DEMIs, our teaching assistants, make more use of self-assessment, peer learning, and better utilize our learner management system. The problem with Sunlearn is that it was designed as an augmentation to our in-class setting and overnight shifted to being our primary platform. So the main opportunity identified was digital fluency development, and this is at a systemic level. So this needs to focus on making our learner management system more effective or designing a new user-friendly platform. This needs to support our formative assessments. It needs to encourage self-regulated learning, allow students to be able to keep track of their progress, and it needs to do all of these things without significantly increasing the staff workload. While there were many staff that found that the forums were not successful for them, there were some who managed to use them effectively. And I think a lot of work needs to be done to share this information and learn from those who did well. And I would like to ask Karen to take over once again.
I'm going to apologize for my neighboring block of flats where the lawnmower is going. So if we think about everything we heard this morning in terms of the keynote panel and everything from Jugganath has said and a couple of other key people, the whole point about formative assessments, which we think is the key potential strength and opportunity to come out of our faculty-wide SWOT analysis, which particularly focused on the nature of assessment, is that there are a number of factors that we need to bear in mind. The whole point is we need to create opportunities for students to reflect on their actions before, during, and after the learning process. Now, we have a fantastic Finlow project, which Professor Martinez-Boyson has actively been working on this in his e-design initiative, getting students on a weekly basis to reflect on what they're doing, how they're doing, and how this is contributing to their understanding. In mechanical and mechatronic engineering, Debbie Blaine, Martin Fenter, and Melody Neves van Rooyen have Also, FinLo and UCDG projects building in assessments that focus on both the outcomes and their learning processes. All our REAP initiatives have explicitly tried to include this feedback loop, getting students to reflect on what they're doing, how they're doing, and how it's contributing to their understanding and their processes. The issue of self-assessment is huge with us, and peer learning and assessment, and we've seen this in a number of other projects as well. And I'll add a link at some stage, maybe to the CLT team. I think you guys have this, in fact, to a number of our REAP and ARTLA initiatives, which are really, really useful. The bottom line, Tanea, and that's our last slide, is that technology is going to change, whether we like it or not. And it's going to change far more quickly than our education systems will ever change. So the idea of using the traditional proctored sit-down final assessment in an online or remote context is not the answer. Our focus should be on driving self-regulated, intrinsically motivated students who buy into why it is they are with us in the first place. That is our job. If we better empower our students to develop this intrinsic motivation through the kinds of opportunities that we've pointed out from our faculty-wide SWOT analysis, we are less likely to have to deal with the whole issue of cheating, and that would make our assessments more valid and enable us to produce the kinds of graduates that Prof. Ramjugannath was talking about this morning, equipped for their place in the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Karen and Tanea. See, Margriet has joined us, and your timing was very, very good. I have one question. So in terms of the new normal, which is the title of your presentation, what will you retain, and is there a case for linking up with other STEM faculties and departments to connect? Because as we know, engineering often is at the lead in terms of design thinking before it became a buzzword in the flipped classroom. Engineering has always been ahead of the game. So what will be retained and how will you take it forward?
I'm going to answer that and say that what we retained, first of all, is this opportunity to build shared repositories that can really help our students tackle fundamental threshold concepts. So we have, thank you to CTL, a FinLo project with the Faculty of Science now, working on our engineering mathematics subject areas, where the mathematics lecturer will be working with all these fantastic REAP champions that we've been showcasing on, one, addressing contextualizing mathematics for where students are going to be using this, as particularly first-year students later in their engineering courses, and enabling the science faculty lecturers to see what happens to those fundamental concepts as they move through a particular professional qualification. And the focus there is to build randomized online repositories of formative assessment-orientated question banks, case studies, and those kinds of initiatives that students can use to augment or supplement or complement what it is they're already learning, for self-study or for peer group learning, or for use instead of some of the standard tutorials they had. So we've already started that collaboration in STEM with the science faculty.
Thank you so much for your presentation, and we will have to say goodbye at this juncture. So colleagues, please look at Dr. Wolf's research online. It's available in the chat, and the future Dr. Hans, watch out for her, a rising star in the mechatronics faculty. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you so much.